Let's call meeting to order. Let's start out with roll call.
Randall Morris.
Present.
Mark Beggs.
Present.
Christy Soligo Fleshman. Larry Witten. And Chairman Buddy Rash.
Present. I think this time I want to take nominations for chairman. We're going to elect new officers before we start the meeting.
I'd like to nominate Mark Beggs.
Second.
I have a nomination, a second for Mark Beggs. Let's take a roll call. Let's take a vote.
Randall Morris.
Approve.
Christy Soligo Fleshman.
Approve.
Buddy Rash.
Approved.
And Mark Beggs.
Approved.
Motion carries. So Mark, you'll take over now.
Okay. So I will take nominations for vice chair.
I nominate,
What's that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I nominate Randall Morris as vice chair.
A second. I need a second from somebody.
I'll second it. I second that.
I thought you did, Mark.
Any other nominations? Vote, please.
Christy Soligo Fleshman.
Approve.
Buddy Rash.
Definitely.
Mark Beggs.
Approve.
And Randall Morris.
Approve.
Motion carries.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the August 24, 2021 Board of Zoning Adjustment minutes.
I'll make a motion we approve.
Second.
Second.
Vote, please.
Buddy Rash.
Approved.
Christy Soligo Fleshman.
Approve.
Randall Morris.
Approve.
And Chairman Mark Beggs.
Approved.
Motion carries. And Chairman, if I may interject here, I don't think the applicant is here for the first case. They got caught in some traffic. So my request would be, if it's okay with the board, to switch the order of the cases and take case number 2 first.
Any objections from the board?
No.
Okay. We'll move case number 2 up to number 1. First off, anyone would like to swear in any individuals that are going to be testifying tonight? Can I just show of hands of people who'd like to speak this evening? Okay. If I could have you all stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth? So help you God? Very good, thank you. You want to have the record show that Mr. Witten is with us? First case we're going to consider tonight is case number 22-102BZA. It is a request for a variance from section 151-6.2 AA4B of the 2011 Clay County Land Development Code pertaining to the building setbacks required for wineries and breweries. Specifically, it's a request to allow structures associated with a winery brewery within the 400-foot setback requirement of the wineries and breweries that are adjacent to residential zoning districts. Such a request will be a non-compliance of the county code of requirements, and the applicant is Raymond Jewell. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, Chairman. Would like to add the staff report as part of the official record.
So be it.
So I've got the staff report pulled up. As the chairman said, this is a request for a variance from section 151-6.2 AA4B. So I'm going to show you several different things. Just initially, I want to show you the site. It's greater than 20 acres. It has frontage on 136th Street, and then also frontage on Plattsburgh Road. Is currently zoned agricultural, and it's in the urban services tier of the county, which tends to be the area closest to the cities. That request is for a setback variance for structures associated with a winery, specifically building structures. So the next thing I'm gonna show is the land development code. And just bear with me, I was planning on the other case being first. So let me get to the right page. First thing I want to show is our use table out of the land development code. The use table shows us what uses are allowed in which zoning districts. So you can see it's arranged by zoning district and then has multiple things down here in the table. If it's an empty cell, that means that use is not allowed. If it has a P, that means it's permitted by right. That means you don't have any special conditional use permits or rezonings that you have to do. If it has a C, that means you need to apply for and be granted a conditional use permit. So if I get down to wineries, the unique thing about wineries are they're in 5 different classes. So you can see, as I stated, ag zoning is what this parcel zoned. So we go down the column here, and first thing we get to is a vineyard. A vineyard is permitted by right on ag zoning. So a vineyard would be growing of grapes, processing the grapes, things like that. Then we have wineries and breweries, and they're organized into 5 different classes. And some acreage requirements as well. So if I go to wineries and breweries class 1, 20 plus acres, in ag zoning is permitted by right. So this request is not a use variance. A winery and brewery class 1 is permitted by right. It is a specific request to allow the building structures to be located closer to the property lines than what this special section of code allows for. So it's permitted by right, but then if you go over to the far column, there is a special section of code on wineries and breweries, and I'll show you that here in a second. I briefly want to touch on class 2, 3, 4, and 5 would require a conditional use permit, which means if somebody wanted to do a class 2, 3, 4, or 5 brewery or winery, that would have to go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and County Commission to be approved. And I'll show you the differences between those different classes as well. So that's the use table. So this is a use that is allowed in ag zoning if it's a class 1 winery or brewery. But they also have to meet all these special conditions in 6.2 AA, which we'll talk about here in a second. So the next thing, I'm going to go to page 141 of the Land Development Code. Which talks about the different classes. So I'm not going to hit too much on this because this is more of a planning and zoning item than a board of zoning adjustment item. But this details what can be done in which class. So if the applicant receives their variance tonight, they will have to submit for a building permit, and they will submit to the Planning and Zoning Department showing all their documentation that they fit within a class 1 winery or brewery. If what they submit shows that they fit in a class 2, then they would have to apply for a conditional use permit, which would kick additional public meetings, that letters would go out to neighbors. They'd have to go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and County Commission. And like I said, I don't want to get into too much detail on that because tonight is specifically about the setback for the structures. So next thing I want to show you is the specific code that they are requesting a variance for. So under development standards, it talks about a site plan and then building setbacks. And it initially says all building structures associated with wineries and breweries must be set back a minimum of 200 feet from all property lines. However, if proposed wineries and breweries are adjacent to residential zoning districts on any side, the minimum setback shall be increased to 400 feet from any property line. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to our aerial. Let me get the right property pulled up here. And I'm going to show you the zoning around the subject parcel, because it is adjacent to residential zoning. So let me zoom out. And it is this parcel here. It's actually in two different sections of the county. So if I identify on this one, there's a section line that runs through the parcel. So it's this and this right here. And then I'm going to turn on my zoning layer. But basically, the subdivision, Oak Ridge, to the west is zoned residential. And then I believe these lots right here are zoned residential. So that kicks in the 400-foot requirement for the setback. And it's thinking, it just takes a minute. So the pink here is residential, and anything in yellow is residential. The kind of light green is agricultural zoning. So there is some agricultural zoning around it as well. I'm going to go back to the staff report if I can. So the next thing I want to go over, if I can get there, are the 4 criteria. So there are 4 specific criteria that must be met, and the burden of proof is on the applicant to show that these 4 criteria are met for any variance request. And the first one is that the requested variance arises from conditions that are unique to the subject property, that are not ordinarily found in the same zoning district, and that are not a result of the owner's intentional action. Second criteria is the granting of the permit for the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. Third criteria is the strict application of the provisions of which a variance is requested will constitute an unnecessary hardship upon the property owner represented in the application. And the final criteria is the variance desired will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or general welfare, nor destroy the intent of the comprehensive plan. So with any of these variance requests, we take them one by one. Staff does not make a recommendation on these cases. I will add, we added some comments to each of these criteria, but I would share that I do not have a concern that the intent of the comp plan would be destroyed if this variance was approved, if the Board of Zoning Adjustment finds that those 4 criteria are met. And if the board finds those 4 criteria are met, a variance of 200 feet to meet the setback requirement of 400 feet to section 151-6.2 AA4B should be approved. The applicant has submitted a letter. I believe there's a presentation that's part of the staff report. They included a site plan and a certificate of survey. I believe they're going to have possibly an updated presentation that they'll present to you tonight. There are quite a few property owner letters, adjacent property owners or Clay County citizen letters that were included in the report, starting in attachment F. There were 8 letters in the report. There was a letter with conditions that they would like to see added if the variance is approved. And then attached to the staff report were additional, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call them a form letter, where the same letter was submitted with different signatures. There were north of 20 of those, probably 25 or 30 of those that were submitted and were put on the website as well. I probably should talk about conditions a little bit. The Land Development Code does allow the board to add conditions to mitigate effects on adjacent property owners, but I would guide the board that if we're going to add conditions, that those conditions need to be dealing with the structure only. This is not a meeting to discuss items that don't have to do with the variance request. Chairman, I know that's a lot of information really quick. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant has a presentation, and I know there's several members of the public that would like to speak as well.
Can you point me to the conditions that were included? That were submitted by the residents?
Yes.
Where is that in the
It's-
attachments?
Yeah, it's in part of the letters.
Yeah, the relocate entrance to Class 1 winery, is that what you're talking about? The paragraph that starts prior to opening proposed winery, and then numbered 1 through 13 plus.
Now I'm missing them.
It's limited to those that are, because all the conditions listed by the number. And that is on the list of those. Sorry. I think the list of those conditions is 4 pages from the end, or 3 pages from the end. Top of the page says the following conditions are requested.
Okay.
Were you able to find them? I'm sorry, there was quite a bit of information with this case,
Yeah.
and I'm struggling to find them now.
So there's 2 pages of conditions that we've been added.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Applicant present? And would everyone like to talk, or do you have someone who's going to represent you that would like to address the board? Is that people that are in favor, or they're actually representing you as the applicant? They're in favor and representing. Okay, I want to talk to someone who's representing the applicant. That would be, okay, that'd be great. If you would step to the podium and state your name and address. And by the way, if anybody that steps to the podium, we are recording this. I would like you to state your name and your address. That way we have it for the record.
Sure, I'm Amy Gray. My address is 441 North Leonard Street, Liberty.
All right, thank you. So you've heard staff's report. Do you
I have.
have anything that you want to add, or anything that you don't understand or need clarification on?
No, I don't think so. We do have a full presentation we'd like to make to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we ready for
Yeah,
that?
feel free, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Carly's going to pass out an updated packet for you guys. This is the same presentation that I'll be giving you.
And it will be shown on the screen as well.
Great, well, thanks for your time tonight, guys. Appreciate the service that you do. I'm on HDRC at the city, so I understand the time commitment and appreciate the value. This variance request, like Kip stated, is really just for a variation from the 400-foot required setback to a 200-foot required setback for the property. Go to the next slide. Sorry, you're going to have to look at your version on your printout, because that's really hard to see on the screen since we're not quite full screen. But essentially, the blue dashed lines that you're seeing on the diagram on the second page are the 200-foot setback from the property. Kind of gives you an idea with the L-shaped piece of property, the section of land that would be viable there in the middle where we not required the 400-foot for the adjacent residential zonings. On the next slide, you can kind of see the property is 500 feet wide, so it's kind of showing you if you did a 400-foot setback from either side, there's not any buildable land left. Just kind of want to explain that. And the next slide is just a blow-up of the one that was on the first slide. So showing the 200-foot setback on all sides, noting that the R1 is to the north, so that's the new subdivision that's going in there. The property to the south is actually also ag zoning, as well as the property that's directly to the south of the structure is also an existing ag zoning. So I'm not going to run through the next one. Kip has kind of described the 4 criteria. I'm going to jump into those on the slide that's the number 1 here. So I think a big point to make here, this property has been in the ownership for 51 years of this family, so this is someone that is not new to the county. The surrounding property was all agricultural when they bought it. And subsequently, there have been several R1 and RU 2.5s that have been approved around that. But I do think it is something that the property owner has not incurred on their own. They obviously bought it as a piece of agricultural property back when that was what it was completely surrounded by. I would like to go ahead and have Mrs. Jewell come up and just give you guys a little bit of history about the property. I just want you to understand the family history. You want to do that still, Susan? Just take a second. How they've ended up back here in Clay County.
Hi, I'm Susan Mayfield, actually.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, haven't changed it. I live at 12825 Northeast 136th Street. It is where I grew up. Rural Route 1, Box 158, on Prairie Home Road. But, so I have been out of the area for a while, but we recently moved back in, and we've been here for 3 years now. So we had been working in other parts of the country, but after my dad passed away, and with my mother, who's sitting there, as she was getting older and needed family close by, we felt it was the right thing to do to move back and be close to her and keep her in the community that she lived in for 50 plus years. So that is why we're here. That's why we are here with her on that property. And as a part of that, we've, over the last few years, as we've been here, and even before that, honestly, we've talked about what could we do to enable us to keep this property, keep it agricultural related, and have it be a benefit both for us and for the community around us.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. I just thought it was helpful to understand why they're back in the area and why now they're trying to make this a financially viable piece of property, because they're going to be living here now. And they would like to use it for agricultural purposes. So the property in question has been with the family. A lot of the additional residential, I would say the urban services tier actually discourages R1 zoning within that. So obviously that several alterations have made to have R1 in this area. And really the intention is for agriculture and some kind of light commercial, which this being agricultural with a light commercial component. The next slide is just to kind of understand if we took a similar piece of property with the 400-foot setbacks, what that would look like. So an unusual condition to this property is really its L-shape in nature. And the portion that's coming down towards us, the skinnier portion, is quite a steep hill. So using that for crops or farming in that nature is really not viable, whereas a vineyard would be a great use and also greatly help prevent runoff, because it's permanently planted.
Is it currently in turf, grass?
It's grass right now, yep. Granting of the permit for the variance will not be contrary to public health and interest. I know there's been a lot of concerns, not what we're here to talk about as far as a setback, but the intention is for this to be a fully organic farm. I mean, everything, all of the fertilizing products, this Rocky Mountain BioAg is kind of what he's using for a guideline, are all completely organic. The water will be filtered before it's actually put on the grapes, so as far as anything coming from the water table, that is not accurate. And it also will be tied to the sewer that's in the adjacent subdivision, because that's been brought out, and so it will not be on a septic system. So I know there were some concerns about that. Property value, open space, so versus this same size of property could be divided into 25 single-family houses based on the adjacent properties and how they've been divided up. So actually the traffic use and the amount of people on the property will be less under this, as well as preserving the agricultural nature. So if you are abutting it, you're going to be looking at vineyards. There is a structure proposed right in the very center of the property that's at the very peak of the hill. So it's more overlooking all the other properties versus being in a sight line for most. So the quiet country life, of course, is what people move out there for. There will not be any events. This is not intended to have weddings and parties. This will be used for wine tastings. And any type of event would be for people to come out and sample the wine, but nothing larger than that. No loud music, no lights. I know some large vineyards do plant or pick 24 hours a day when the grapes are ready to go. This is a pretty small amount that will actually be harvested here, and there is no intention to be doing that at night with the lights on. And that will be for a couple of weeks in the fall, because they only harvest once a year. So the winery will only be open 4 days a week. Thursdays are really a prep day with Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and shortened hours on Sunday. Again, it's Sunday and just time in the evening and late night and getting people home. The next slide just kind of gives you guys an idea of the views. As you can see here, we're pretty much on the top of the hill looking out in all directions. Even seeing the adjacent homes is difficult to do from this location. And obviously these photos were taken when there are no leaves on the trees. So obviously in the spring, summer, and fall, there's an even greater buffer of views between the properties. The next slide just kind of shows you, so this is a picture of Susan when she was a kid playing in a pasture that is now the subdivision that's adjacent to them. So obviously there's been a pretty big change in how this land has been used since the time that they've owned it. Strict application of the provisions will prevent the winery from ever being built, and therefore the agricultural purpose that's intended will not be possible. In order to make money from the land that the families had for over half a century, the options are limited. The topography, as you can see from the images, makes a good amount of the land non-usable for traditional farming, and space is not large enough to make ends meet with cattle or many other types of husbandry. So they've really been looking at ways to make this a financially viable agricultural property, and this was the solution that they have come up with. The next one, just expanding a little bit more, since we've kind of hit the public health, safety, and welfare. Again, just kind of reiterating, the intention is this for it to be a fully organic farm. There's an organic farm adjacent to the property, so in keeping with those same concepts, definitely not wanting to interfere, create runoff on the other properties. And one point to make is there are already 2 retention ponds. The peak of the hill is kind of where the building is proposed, but there's already a retention pond to both the south and the north. So any of the runoff and going those 2 directions is already going to a retention pond. Anything that would be coming to the east, which would be down on our plans, there is a gravel roadway, and I know there have been some comments, we'll be in full compliance with what the zoning ordinance requires, but to fully pave the drive-in parking lot is just creating more runoff in that situation as opposed to being able to absorb. But really, that's not an issue for tonight. Increased traffic. There has been some comments or concerns about large semi-trucks and whatnot coming. This is a small winery. It's not going to be that kind of capacity for pickups and deliveries. It's going to be the same type of trucks that are coming and doing Amazon deliveries, UPS trucks, FedEx trucks. So not a huge increase on traffic by any means. It's not industrial. It's just going to ship around to local businesses. So with the amount of production they'll have, we're not putting out 1 million cases a year by any means. The one-lane bridge is a concern for a lot of people that live along that area and travel there, and that is an issue. But all options will be taken to point people to come in from other directions. So they can approach the property from the north. That will be how it will be directed on the website. Obviously, we don't have a ton of control over how Google Maps decides to send people, but they will use signage and their website to kind of point people to come in from a different direction to avoid that. The variance, the variance desired will not adversely affect the public health, and it is an intention with the comprehensive plan. So this large paragraph in the middle, I'm just going to read, and I think it's really important to keep this in mind. Local governments have a broad ability to mitigate the public impact of private development and promote the public welfare. The legitimate right of government to legislate land use for the protection and promotion of the public welfare must be balanced with the property owner's right to promote the reasonable economic use of his property. The plan will balance the interests of all parties, considering the needs to individual property owners while promoting the good of the community at large. So, like I mentioned, the urban services tier, and as Kip had mentioned in his presentation, we do feel that that's in keeping with the intention of both the comprehensive plan and that tier, as it will be a commercial business that's purely focused on promoting sale of locally produced agricultural products, and that's fully in alignment with the comprehensive plan. Preserve Watershed. Fully organic Vineyard is objectively better for Watershed than many high-end housing developments, which increase non-permeable surface in the form of roads, sidewalks, homes, sprinkler systems in every yard, lawn care that includes pesticides, chemical herbicides, and fertilizers. Also for comparison, the production portion of this is a 5,000 square foot building. That's approximately the same sizes of the homes that are in the adjacent neighborhoods. So there have been concerns that this is going to be an enormous building in comparison, and that's really not the case. It's about the same size as a lot of these homes. It's not a large facility. Preservation of open space. The winery preserves the open space for countless years to come. Tilled fields or pasture land are more easily converted to housing as winery, and really that's not the intention. The intention is to put these grapes in, let them grow for a lot of years. The longer they're in, the better they're going to produce, the better the wine's going to be there. So it's really a long-term crop that's going in. And now I'm only going to focus on some of the community concerns. So this diagram kind of shows you the white box in the middle is the winery with the tasting room. You can see to the left is labeled a light blue retention pond. Same thing a little bit further over to the right. So those are two existing retention ponds that are on the property. Oh, thank you. Retention pond here, retention pond here. And then this shaded green area all the way around is intended to be the vineyards. So along this steep hill, and Raymond has already planted quite a few in this area, but it's really going to be creating a buffer all around the facility. And that's what you want for a winery. It's the experience that you're kind of out in the country, you're experiencing nature, it's quiet and peaceful. The views here are great.
What are the white rectangles?
Those are text box. So if we could see that close enough, you could see that it says this area right here is going to remain. Oh, it's regenerating just a minute. Maybe. Okay. Right here and right here are areas should overflow parking be required that will remain turf, but that could be overflow parking because they're relatively flat in those two areas. Only paving the minimal required parking at the building based on the zoning ordinance. And then this is not a roundabout, that is for the fire department. So that turning radius, I know that can be deceptive, people think that's semis, that's only for the fire department. There's really no intention of there being semi-traffic to the site at all. Breaking it down just a little bit more. Those steep surfaces are the dark green here. Again, ideal for vineyards. If you've ever seen the hillsides in Napa or in Italy, steep hills are great for agricultural purpose for vineyards. Health of the air, land, soil has been discussed, previously presented, but it's going to be the all-organic vineyard. So any specifics about that can certainly be provided, but are really not a concern for this. Go ahead. Public safety. So the entryway into the property will be widened out per MoDOT standards. All of that has to be permitted by the county. So what's there today is not what will remain. That'll all be dictated by MoDOT, and that will be widened. So I know there were concerns about that, definitely making that a safer in and out. Property values. I think preserving green open space for people that desire to live in the country is probably a positive. Again, I have a sister that lives in Napa, and the most desirable properties that you can get are those that are abut the vineyards because they're always quiet. They're only farmed a few days a year, and depending on the pesticides that are used, so being all organic, it would be a great view to have out of your back door, quiet, peaceful, maintaining the agricultural nature of the county. Light and noise pollution has been a concern. Obviously, we'll have to comply with the county standards for any noise pollution. The building is set far away from all the adjacent properties. We are not planning to use lights at night for picking. It's going to be mitigated by the surrounding vegetation. So if you've seen vineyards, I mean, we're talking 5 feet tall. That's about as tall as me, as the vines will be planted. And so there'll be a nice buffer with that vertically as well as horizontally. They're not going to be hosting events like weddings, so the loud music, the bands playing, et cetera, that's really not part of this equation. If anything, they'll just be holding classes to teach people about the winemaking process. Setting a precedent. I guess everything can always be determined as setting a precedent, but For your commission, there have been 21 requests that have come past you guys since 2016. Only 2 of those were variance requests for setbacks, and they were both approved. So I don't think that approving a setback variance is going to be setting a precedent for future that hasn't already been established. Business counter and community goals. So while it's been suggested that a business in this location is counter to the development goals of the county due to the fact that this property is well within the urban services tier, the mix of relatively inconspicuous agriculture combined with a commercial use that benefits the surrounding neighborhoods fits well within the description of what is desired in this tier. The comprehensive plan lists non-residential uses appropriate for this tier as recreation, limited commercial, and industrial consisting with long-range growth plans adjoining the city. So limited commercial is a given, and then recreation, I think, is also part of it when you can come and be a part of the outdoor environment and experience that. So that's the conclusion of my presentation, if you guys have any questions for me.
Yeah, so I do. So you're going to be open Friday, Saturday, Sunday, partially Thursday. What kind of events, what's going to happen on Friday, Saturday nights?
It's going to be wine tastings where folks are going to come out through the day. They can come in groups. They can come individually. They will have a wine tasting bar and counter and some light, like charcuterie, nothing prepared on site, but light snacks that they can just come out, taste the wine, and hang out.
And how many people do you anticipate?
We
Say-
are
let's say
limited to less than 100 inside the building based on the footprint and how it's designed. There is outdoor seating. I would say it's going to be very rare for that to be at capacity. Raymond, do you have any additional thoughts on number of people?
You need to go to the podium so we can get a recording.
I'm Raymond Jewell. All the studies for anybody that's been to wineries, your busiest times for wineries are usually lunchtime Saturday, lunchtime Sunday. During those times and days, you're talking, you'll get 80 to 100 people show up during a 3-hour period, usually is what happens during those periods of times. Thursdays, you may get a few people in for coming in to have a snack and have a drink or something like that. Friday evenings, you'll have some people, but those are your busy times. We have on our sheet, everybody's, oh, you're open late. No, we're going to be closed, and everybody going home by the 9 o'clock during that because we'll be shutting down 7, 8 o'clock and everybody's gone. We just have to be cleaned and gone by 9 o'clock and shut the doors, shut the gates. We're not going to be open late at all. I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night and I live right beside it, so I do not want to be open late. So that's kind of the whole thing about it. Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions for me while I'm here?
Anything on operations from Board?
Well, you're really limiting yourself on growth, seems to me like. I mean, there's not going to be much growth in the future, right?
Actually, we can have quite a bit of growth because of the wine industry, the way it's changed. A lot of it's due to what's happened in the last 3 years.
But with the setback on class 1, if you go any bigger, you're going to go into a class 2, right? And then you're not going to have no setback.
No, it's not about what we plant. It's for the building right there. This is designed for a 10 to 15,000 case winery a year is what this is designed for. What we grow there will grow between 4,000 and 6,000 cases a year. What we grow at another location will make up for that in another area. So, and that is by statute. You have to crush those grapes somewhere else and bring in juice only.
You have that vineyard in other areas? Or?
I grew up in eastern Colorado as a farm and ranch boy, and my whole family out there has quite a bit of land, and we're starting a vineyard out there to do that, to make up for that capacity is what we're doing. And when we bring those grapes in, it's by pickup and small trailer, and they're totes of juice. They're not big truckloads and stuff like that. So it's the weight capacity, things like that. We aren't bringing in big trucks. They're totes. They're in 150 to 300 gallon totes, and you just bring them in, you pump them into it. It also reduces out noise. Clay County, when they did I talked to the president of the Wine Association of Missouri. When they did their stuff for the vineyards, they were very smart because they knew Clay County was growing more urban. So when they put that thing at 50% has to be crushed of your grapes, has to be of your right there on site. They did that for a noise reduction, okay, in those areas, because that's the loudest part of when you do your stuff, and when you're doing your wine production, when you're doing the grape crushing and stuff like that. So we'll be only crushing grapes for 2 or 3 days with doing, because we only have a 7-acre
You make that much noise, you take your shoes off and stop.
That's pretty much it. But it's still not that bad.
Lucy
It
style,
won't,
right?
it won't be that bad, but if you kept hearing something grinding in the background, we don't want to mess anybody up, but we won't be doing much of that at all at this particular site. All that'll be done off-site and the juice is brought in, so it takes care of all that noise issue.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry, you want to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So 15,000 cases, that sounds like a lot of wine to me. How many-
15,000 cases?
Does to me, I'm not a big wine
A
drinker.
pallet of wine goes out is basically 60 cases. When we're supplying mom and pop wineries, the gentleman we're bringing in here is a world-renowned winemaker. That's our goal. He's waiting out there to see if all this gets approved. Okay, he supplies other vineyards and things like other wineries that don't have vineyards with wine, and he ships out like a pallet to 3 pallets to them, and that goes out on what we call the little short reefer truck that comes up. Nothing long, because you get overweight real quick with wine. You can't ship more than 10 pallets on a truck, period, is what we go. And the most he's ever shipped, period, he's been doing this for 30 years, has been 12 pallets to a place. That'll
So
still fit.
How many cases are on a pallet? Did I miss that?
60.
60, okay.
60.
So 720 on a load,
Yeah.
okay.
It's on 700.
Cases on a load.
Yeah,
So if you got 15,000, you'd have at least 20 loads going out of there.
a year,
That'd be if you ran the maximum.
if you ran maximum. But you gotta remember, 3,000 to 4,000 of those cases go out the front for people doing tastes and taking out a bottle or taking out 6. That's pretty much what goes out the front when they coming up and they're doing tastes. On average, the wineries in the area do 3,000 to 4,000 cases sales, and basically through their wine tasting. So you're only looking at a lot less than that. There's not a whole lot of truck traffic can be going in and out of there.
Well, I know you've got to have some big vision on what's gonna happen, because you're putting a lot of dollars into infrastructure.
I'm putting a lot of dollars into infrastructure.
You said the size of the building's going to be a 5,000
The
square foot
winery's
building?
5,000 square feet where you make the wine. The tasting facility in front of that's 2,500, so it's a total of 7,500
Okay,
actually.
is that the footprint size?
That's footprint size.
Okay.
And that is exactly the spec for a 10 to 15,000 square foot, to do 10 to 15,000 cases a year.
Yeah,
Now, we
okay.
do have a vision to do stuff in other states and stuff like that way down the road, but right now, for here, this is what we're planning on doing. Any other questions?
I don't think I have any. I mean, my biggest concern is a commercial operation sitting in the middle of residential. That's going to be my biggest bugaboo here. And not having a buffer.
It takes 2 people to do all that winemaking and run that vineyard.
But it's still commercial, and that's really not what.
Well, it's an ag business. It's not really,
Well, I really works for you because you have a very big vision,
yeah,
and I think it'd be a boon for the area.
yeah, I agree.
So if you want to keep it ag, why can't you just grow the grapes there, put a wine tasting and processing in another location nearby?
In Colorado, the place that we're growing in is the most depressed and least amount of people in probably Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, any other area. That area there is looking for anything to try to save the community. That's why we picked it there.
No,
When
no.
I went to school there was 100 kids in the class, and K through 12, there's now 22. Everybody's dying through there, so this is to help support that area. We've done studies in that area.
Well, I'm not talking about supporting that area. I'm saying, why can't you use this 20 acres to grow as a vineyard and then process the the grapes at another location near here? In other words, maybe find a spot in Kearney where you can have the commercial aspect of it.
If there was another place that grew grapes, we could do something like that, but to split that up is very, very costly. If you were to grow 18 acres of grapes and we could bring them over to our facility, it would be okay, but I can't do that. The laws in Clay County say that I have to grow whatever I grow grapes, that 7 acres, I can only bring in another 7 acres of grapes into my facility and crush those. That's not enough to do 10 to 15,000 cases. You got to have 50 to 60 acres of grapes just to hit 10,000 cases of wine. So there's a mix there. You got to know what you're doing, otherwise you won't be able to make enough
Just
wine.
somewhere in Clay County?
What?
You got the grapes that be grown in Clay County? or
No,
other locations?
no, you can look at, there's a number 2 on the wine tasting thing that you can crush them anywhere as long as you bring the juice, and it's made at our facility. It has to be made at our facility.
Sorry to interrupt, but keep in mind that this is just a setback variance
Yes,
tonight.
correct.
That's the only issue. This isn't a use variance, this isn't a conditional use permit application, this is just the setback. It's not commercial, it's just can they build this closer to the property line than the code allows. That is the only thing.
And I agree with you, but I think the nature of the operation is pretty relevant to the people that are gonna be backed up to it. So I think when you shrink that buffer down, it's pretty relevant what's going on there. I mean, if it's, and maybe not necessarily commercial, quote unquote, but if there are trucks coming in and employees coming in and out, especially Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, people living behind it may not.
Well, and I would say that whether it's 200 or 400 feet from the property line, you're going to have the same trucks and the same people. The question now is, can they build something closer to the property line than the code allows?
Right.
Then the question for a CUP would be for another day with P and Z, not with BZA.
Right, and then the other thing is, if you do a traffic study on it, it's double the amount of traffic by putting a subdivision in there than putting this winery. So there's more trucks, traffic, and everything else doing that.
I'm
So
more concerned about noise. That's what I'm concerned about.
I understand totally, yeah, and there's guidelines with Clay County that we have to stay underneath that or we get shut down. We will comply, I promise.
And so Chairman, if I may, so it really goes back to those 4 criteria. So after all the discussion's over, has the applicant shown they met those 4 criteria? If the board feels they have, then the decision would be, would you want to add conditions that would mitigate the effects on the surrounding property owners? And that could be a discussion that the board could have. If you feel the conditions haven't been met, then obviously that would be the other choice.
Well, I think we need to hear first from the people who are opposed
Sure.
before we make that decision.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we've got all the questions answered.
If there's anything else, I'll
We
answer.
can come back up.
I can come back up later too.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
appreciate it, thank you.
I'm going to leave your pointer right here, Jeff.
So I'd like to talk to the folks that are opposed to this winery or the setback. And we've got letters, you guys have submitted letters to us. So we kind of read through these. I'd rather not rehash all this, but if you want to state it once, that's fine. But I mean, there's a lot of you here, just for the sake of time. I'd rather not have you repeat something that someone else has said. So with that, if anyone would like to talk about opposition, feel free. And again, we'd like to state your name and address.
Yes, sir.
For the record.
Aaron Young, here on behalf of Star Development. Address is 244 West Mill Street, Suite 101, Liberty. You were pulling the mic up just a little bit. You're a tall gentleman. It's the first time anybody's ever asked to hear me better. Sort of refreshing. We're here to request that the board deny the request for a setback variance for the winery. Basically because we share Mr. Begg's concern about taking a commercial operation and plopping it down right in the middle of a residential area. We developed the Oak Ridge subdivision, which is immediately to the west of the winery, and also the Oak Brook subdivision, which is west of Oak Ridge. Those are nice subdivisions, they're nice houses. The residents there have certain expectations for quiet enjoyment. And that 400-foot setback is in the code for a reason. Vineyards are expensive. They're expensive to start up, they're expensive to operate. I'm sure that the applicant knows that far better than I do. I have never operated a vineyard. And I think that events probably are wine, tastings, whatever. Those are probably the best opportunity to generate revenue, and we hope they're successful. We hope there's lots of people and they sell lots of wine, and we're not opposed at all to the use, but we just don't think this is the right location for it. We just, like you said, the noise is a concern, and we don't know that we believe that taking what is ostensibly a commercial operation, no matter how many people are involved in the actual operation, it's a commercial operation, and we're setting it right down in the middle of a residential area. So for those reasons that we respectfully ask that the board deny the request for variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. With that said, I'm going to have to recuse myself from the proceedings. I have business dealings with Star Development, so I'm going to hand the gavel off to Randall. Sorry, I didn't realize that.
Okay. Yes, can you please state your name?
Good evening.
and address?
I'm Richard Moore. I live with my wife Linda at 13318 Plattsburgh Road. We have lived there for about 29 years, and for reference, while Star's on the west side of this property, we share the south border with them. Our north property line is their south for the winery. I oppose granting this variance request. I don't believe it meets any of the four criteria set out in the plan. The criteria A is that the variance request does not really arise from any unique conditions. The setback rules are pretty clear, and there's plenty of properties throughout Clay County that would not accommodate a 400-foot setback. So this is not by any means unique. The lot is not square, it's L-shaped, and it's only 500 feet, as they've stated, at its widest point. The criteria B, granting this variance, is contrary to the public interest, as the letters that you have mentioned which show that there's a vast majority of surrounding residents who are not in favor of granting this variance. The criteria C is one of the question of unnecessary hardship, and that's sort of a hard one to address. These setback rules really aren't new. I think it was written in 2012 and revised in 2015. Every owner has a responsibility to do due diligence before figuring out how they want to use their property. If the owner has incurred expenses, I don't believe that's the responsibility of the neighbors or, of course, the county. The criteria D is that granting this variance will affect the health, safety, and general welfare of the people of the county, and certainly the people in this neighborhood. The proposed winery results in retail activity, increased traffic on a very narrow road, trucks bringing in grapes, hauling out wine, and as we've discussed just minutes ago, noise from events. All these activities are associated with what is virtually a commercial activity, and it is without question a disruption in an area that is primarily single-family residential. I would point out that our property is the only property that abuts us that is agriculturally zoned. Everything else is residential. So really, when we look at those four criteria, it seems to us that it's pretty clear that it fails the four tests that are outlined in the plan. There are other issues. This urban services tier issue is worth, I think, going over one more time, and it's pretty clear that that the plan allows doesn't prohibit a winery from being in the urban services tier. It just places some additional rules. So while the preference stated in the plan is that a winery should be outside the urban services tier, it accommodates it, but it says a 400-foot setback is appropriate, and that's pretty clear so that residents around the area are not impacted unduly by the activity and by the buildings. This would be a break in precedence, I believe. I've reviewed your minutes, and most of the requests are of most of them have to do with lot proportions, and really nothing comes close to cutting a setback in half. And I would really, I'm sure you've thought of the fact that if you approved it and another landowner, say in Oak Ridge, said, well, I want to build a little longer house, I'd like a little more of my house facing west, and so I'm going to encroach on the side setbacks. I mean, I can't imagine you want to review every possible variance to a setback requirement that are obviously throughout our county. This is a little operational, but it really, I think it's important, and we touched on it just before I talked about this importing of grapes from Colorado and Washington. I mean, there's obviously truck traffic involved in that, but it seems like it's not, it's not in compliance with the rule of 50% of the fruit processed has to be from inside Clay County. The state also has some rules that are even stricter, that there's a maximum of 15% of grapes that could come outside of the state. So there's county and state rules. It's pretty complex, but the idea of a production facility literally in our backyards of grapes not grown in Clay County is troubling. There's one last really setback issue that's not addressed, and that is that the house and barn and sheds on the property, can you point them? Right there, yeah, are very close to the property line. I don't know how close, but it's obviously under 100 feet. And in the proposal from the landowner, they say that those structures will be part of the vineyard. So we've already got structures that are part of the vineyard operation that are right on top of the line. So it would seem that would present a setback issue as well. So for those reasons, the 4 criteria and those other reasons, I respectfully request that you deny this request for a variance. This winery really is not compatible with a residential neighborhood that we all live in and enjoy. By the test that your plan sets out, it doesn't appear to meet either the letter or the intent of the comprehensive plan. Thank you for listening. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Could I get a point of clarification? The residential buildings, that he just pointed out, how would those fit with the setback requirements if that's moved from agriculture to a winery?
So the way I interpret the code, it's buildings that are associated with the winery, so no winery operations could take place in those buildings. And as long as that happened, then they don't have to meet the 400-foot setback.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
We need a short list.
Peg Creedon, 13224 Plattsburgh Road. I'd like to echo what Richard just said, and I have a few other items I would like to talk about. I am opposed to the variance. The location makes no sense to me. I am concerned about the runoff. The vineyard is up on a hill, and the first impact from that runoff will be Prairie Birthday Farm, which Richard and Linda own. The next would be Walnut Creek, which is on my property. So all of this is, whatever's coming down is coming downhill, and I don't feel real good about it. And then lastly, the Fishing River. I would like to request a surface water management plan from the DNR and an environmental impact study from the EPA. As a matter of fact, speaking of Walnut Creek, let me say that in 2005, the Missouri Department of Conservation determined that Walnut Creek is a riparian area and should not be subject to effluent from the Oak Brook subdivision sanitary facility. And so, to this day, the Walnut Creek is one of the few remaining havens for wildlife, and I'd like to see it remain that way. And I'd also like to know a little bit about the owners or the applicants' organic practices and its experience. That is all.
Thank you.
Good evening, Justin Ritter. I'm here with my wife Meredith. We live at 13317 Plattsburgh Road. Let's see, I too grew up on a rural Route 1 in the area. Our property is the one just at the bottom of the residential area that catches about 2 or 3 cars a year coming around that curve when they can't navigate that correctly. I'm worried that's going to go up a little bit with alcohol consumption. Specifically, I respectfully request that you decline this variance, specifically because of the use of that building. I'm going to be honest. You know, I hate to tell somebody what they can and cannot do on their property, particularly agricultural. A vineyard sounds nice, but a building that could house 80 to 100 people in the middle of our neighborhood. My house was built in 1978. It's been there for a while. So 80 to 100 people drinking alcohol. I know they say there's not going to be music, there's not going to be lights. That's not what goes with wine tastings. I've been to a few wine tastings. It's a good time. So I don't want people drinking alcohol, coming through our neighborhood, going to that building, shoehorned in the middle of where we all live. I just don't want to see that in our neighborhood. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Patrick Sigmund. I live at 13416 Plattsburgh Road. And I'm actually the property that touches it right there on the corner of their L. That would be my property there. You know, as going back to being family owned, my wife and I bought that house 3 years ago, got married in it. Now we had twin boys who were 10 months old. And, you know, my goal is to raise my family there, you know, just as everyone else around the neighborhood. You know, that house is pre-1900s. But just to get an aspect of that Plattsburgh Road coming off the north end, I mean, that is coming off of a hill. I've had 3 cars in my front yard. I'm on my 3rd mailbox now. My fence is no longer there because it got taken out. So as you come down there, it starts to S-curve around my house, and then that's what goes into that single car bridge, which is, I mean, very tight. So just to get an aspect, we're coming straight off of a hill, and again, it pretty well S-turns as it passes my property coming in to enter there. Again, the views they showed from where that sits, I mean, really didn't depict it on their slideshow. I mean, that sits above on the hill, looking directly down onto my property, and then pretty well puts it as an equal view for the neighborhood across the road. I mean, they're sitting pretty well eye contact with how it sits. So for it to look like it sits up there, how you take your pictures, but again, it's right on the peak of the hill. And then, you know, I have 3 acres that comes off the boundary line, you know, take or so, which is in pasture as well, which all that is in pasture. And I mean, I have a video on my phone because that little Catching Creek runs right behind my garage through there. It overflows all the way into the bottom of my outbuilding there. And I mean, it can't support any more runoff. And by, you know, adding non-permeable surfaces as a road and a building and everything like that, I find it tough to believe that the vines are going to catch more of this runoff than what is already there of being in pretty much just a hayfield. I also worry if I get bottle casts for my boys when they get here in the next years of this runoff coming onto that field. I mean, will this leave my pasture unusable for me? I don't know. I believe that was all the points that I was wanting to make this evening, so thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm short. I'm going to lower it down a little bit. I'm Lori White. I'm at 13501 Highview Drive. Here on behalf of me and my husband, he's at work right now, could not be here. We ask respectfully that you would decline this variance. If you've ever had the pleasure of meeting a car on that 1-lane bridge in a blind corner in the middle of summer, you would probably agree also. Sorry. The matter of the septic system, I would love to see something that's in writing from Star Development that says that they're okay with them connecting to their septic system. As a homeowner who's had to redo our septic system recently, I know too much about the codes with that. I don't know. No matter the variance for the building, there's got to be septic somewhere. And in hearing that Star Development is also against it, I would love to see that in writing. Sorry. To look at my notes. The traffic, my teenage drivers. The hill that's there now is grassland because they bulldozed off the hillside and the native vegetation that was already there to put in that driveway that's on Plattsburgh Road just a few years ago. So there was native vegetation there. It's no longer there. So I wanted to point that one out too. But I think that that's all I have right now. Thank you for your time.
I'm Cheryl Boyles. I live at 13326 Oak Brook Drive. We're in the Oak Brook subdivision. We butt up against Oak Ridge. I know I echo everybody of what they have also said. The people who want to put in the winery talked about trying to divert traffic not coming off of Plattsburgh Drive or Plattsburgh Road and probably directing it, I'm guessing, Highway A to 136. That's going to put all that traffic going right across the entrance to Oak Brook subdivision and Oak Brook Ridge. My other major concern is we're on a private sewer system, and we share that with Oak Ridge, and I can't imagine thinking of another 100 people sharing that sewer or private sewer also. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
You know, we speak of, Patrick Sigmund, 13416 Plattsburgh Road.
Thank you.
You know, when we bought that house, I mean, we bought it because there wasn't a neighborhood there. We bought it because there wasn't a winery there. You know, obviously a neighborhood can go in there. So if that, you know, if I had to pick between the two, I didn't, you know, we'd rather have neither one, but, you know, I look at it as a neighborhood being more beneficial for my family as where I'm at. Place for maybe more children to be there for my kids to play with. I also believe that if a neighborhood goes in, the people who live in that neighborhood are going to understand Plattsburgh Road, understand there's no shoulder, understand how to drive it. I believe it'll be less vehicles, 25 houses, 2 cars, that's 50 cars. Say that, you know, are up there, what they get used today would be, I believe, a lot minimal than 80 to 100 people coming in a couple hour spurts. Never been on that road, they will end up in my front yard at some point or another. And 2, if, you know, I feel like, you know, this house is no longer there or fits my family, I don't believe it's going to help my resale value at all. Whereas to bring someone in who's want to start a family like I am at that house, but have a winery right there in their backyard. So, thank you.
Just,
And can we take new testimony before we
This-
rehash
this will take
everybody?
2 seconds. I promise.
Chairman, it's your call.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify that Star Development does own and operate the private sewer system in Oak Brook and Oak Ridge. We have not granted permission for any new connections to that sewer system, nor to my knowledge have any new connections been requested.
Okay, thank you.
And Chairman, can I add just one thing? My understanding is Timber Creek is the sewer authority of that sewer system, not Star Development. So Timber Creek would, not that that's really relevant to the building at this point, that would be handled at the staff review if this variance is approved.
Okay, are there more comments that are not repeating previous comments? Linda?
I am Linda Hetzel. I live with Richard at 13318 Plattsburgh Road, the entire shared south and downhill property line of the requested variance. I urge you to deny the applicant's request to violate the Land Development Code and thereby maintain the integrity of the Land Development Code in support of the comprehensive plan. Our farm is the unique and irreplaceable intended for protection by the Land Development Code. I've been an officer with the Missouri Organic Association. I've spoken with an inspector of East Coast Organic Vineyard, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it could take 20 years. And organic is widely defined. So the applicant could agree to put nothing but milk and honey on this landscape, but the variance is granted to the land, not the current owner, and it will increase the likelihood that something will be done differently in the future with a different owner. And there are no regulations to address the pesticides and herbicides needed for grapevines, which are a monocrop of non-native plants.
There was a great emphasis on looking at the 4 requirements to grant the variance, but the first 30 minutes was spent talking about the business of the retail, commercial, manufacturing that would take place after the variance is granted. So I feel compelled by that to reinforce the issues with the threats to public health and safety. I know the property well. I rented from Helen and Jean for 3 years and cross-country skied and rode my horses over there for that privilege. And it wasn't eroding until the current owner disturbed the land, and the one retention pond that is above our pond hasn't been functional since it was built. So that does not give me any sense of comfort that that is part of the watershed management plan. So again, I do not believe the applicant has met any of the conditions. I'm disappointed that in the application that variant C was rewritten by the applicant to read as a practical difficulty versus what it actually is in the code, and that is unnecessary hardship. It is not an unnecessary hardship. Vineyard would be great. Grapevines would be great. They are not a cover crop. They won't prevent erosion. It's another monocrop. One of the items on the map that hasn't been addressed was the vegetative buffer that's around the property. And that is all on other people's property, and it is our food crops that are drawn on the map by the architects to serve as a vegetative buffer for the vineyard. I'm not offering our food crops as a buffer for drift and runoff. We were the ones who submitted 2 pages of possible conditions. And while that's not part of the variance request, as long as the sales pitch is about how great the commercial, retail, and manufacturing is going to be, which is purely conjectural, a guess, a dream, a hope. It has nothing to do with opening up this land to commercial, retail, and manufacturing. I'd be happy to answer any questions about organic agriculture. I have a lot of students learning how to grow food without the use of synthetic chemicals. And even if Midwest BioAg is going to supply the product, it has to be determined by the vineyard manager, and not, really the land management, the vineyard management should not be determined by a product supplier, because of course their whole interest is selling more product. So it really should be determined by the vintner. Let's see, I think that's it. I'm sure I'll think of something else.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one last thing, I do know. Reference was made to William Jewell, and I've spoken with tenured faculty there. There is no one in agriculture, and there is no agriculture content, as I understand it, in their curriculum. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your public service.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Any more discussion on this issue at all? Yes?
Again, I'm Susan Mayfield, 12825 Northeast 136th Street. I don't know if I need to say that each time, but so just to comment on a few things that were mentioned. First of all, this is about the variance, about the setback variance. So my understanding is we can go ahead and plant a vineyard. And we have a partial vineyard planted, and we will continue to plant the vineyard because that's what our plan is. So the setback has nothing to do with whether or not we can plant the vineyard. Again, that's my understanding. Also, my understanding is we could put a building on top of the hill, whether there's a variance or variance approved or not. We can have a building on top of the hill. Now, obviously, we would like to make good use of the vineyard that we're planting and the building that we would like to build, and have a place to process our crop and make it into something that will be profitable, make it be a place where the community can come together and meet each other outside of the zoning meetings. And I really do think it could be a very beneficial thing for the area, not only our immediate community, but the greater Clay County and surrounding areas. I don't anticipate that we'd have 100 people in the building. It has that capacity. I live just as close as anyone else to where we're proposing to do this. I mean, I'm in that house there. And I would not make it anything that I wouldn't be okay living next to. So as just a matter of fact, as my husband and I have thought of different ideas, we've batted around several things that we could do with the property to try to make it something that we could be proud of, something that our family could, enjoy even after we're gone, and something for the community as well. There have been several ideas that, I might have had an idea and he said, nope, not doing that. He had a few ideas, nope, not doing that. This one really seems like one that could be something fun for the community and something that would do what we want to do and keep the property as something that our family would want to own and continue to enjoy. So that's one thing that, of the requirements. Why don't we do this somewhere else? Well, somewhere else is not where I grew up. Somewhere else does not have the memories for me. So that's part of the reason why this is special to us. We can go anywhere in the country and do something else. That's true. But this area is special to us, and the community is special to us. Someone mentioned that we bulldozed the hillside. We added the drive. We added access off the backside of the property. So that's what that is. We didn't bulldoze the hillside. The vegetation was probably about that tall. There was a lot of stuff because it had been several years since my parents had animals on that property until it all grew up. If you want to see, if we could make money, and I suggested this, but if we could make money on a crop of poison ivy, we had the perfect property to do it. I mean, that stuff grew tall. So did we get rid of it? Not completely, but I'm still trying. So the vegetation, yeah, so we've been mowing it for the last 3 years. And it took a while to get it mowed down to where it's actually nice to walk around. I think it was Sunday afternoon. We had Mom, Raymond, and I, and we took a walk around the property. We couldn't have done that 3 years ago. In fact, three and a half years ago, before we had been able to make the move back to this area, my mom, after we had been visiting, we had cut some paths in the pasture, had gone back home, and got a phone call from my mom. And she was panicking. She said, I'm lost. I don't know how to get back to the house. It's like, Mom, where are you at? I'm out in the pasture. I said, okay. And she was on FaceTime, and she was shaking, and it was hot, and she was sweating. And I said, Mom, go to the top of the hill and look around, and you'll see the roof of the barn. And she did, and she was able to make it back to the house at that time. So yes, we took those, 5.5, 6 foot weeds and overgrowth. Some might like it and like to look at it from across the street. It was dangerous for my mom, who took a walk and got lost on her own property. Sorry, Mom, didn't mean to tell on you. One of the things that we didn't point out that I wanted to mention is between where we want this site, and this is very relevant to the setback, between where we want this site and the neighborhood that's going in to our west, there is like a 50-foot conservation easement. So there's a lot of trees there and a pond. So that is an additional buffer to the neighborhood. I think Raymond can better address the septic question, but I think that did get addressed earlier. But if that didn't get addressed to anyone's satisfaction, we can mention it.
necessary.
Okay, all right. Traffic, there's a lot of bad drivers out there. I agree. I am amazed at how many people run into the gentleman's fence. It's crazy. The road is not that, my opinion, I've been driving it for a long time. The road is not that dangerous. So just saying that. But traffic is going to be there whether this winery happens or not. And it could get worse if there's a subdivision. So that's my point on that. I just disagree with some of the comments that it violates the land development code. I hope you all disagree with that as well. And as far as the comment about erosion and the property eroding, that is not happening. I don't understand the comment about the ponds not being, what was the word? Functional. I mean, we haven't had issues with erosion on our property. Now, I will tell you, I should tell you, the erosion problem that we've had on our property happens where the Oak Ridge subdivision goes up to that pond in the north, that dry pond, and comes shooting through our property, 18 acres of runoff, shooting through our property to the trees up there that then shoot across into our lake. So that's where the runoff is coming from. It's not coming from what we're doing on our property. It's coming from the subdivision. And we understand, there's not much we can do about that, again, I think it was not all of the Oak Ridge subdivision, but there's property like 7 acres from across 136th Street that drains into that detention pond, and shoots across the front of our property. So that's where the water's coming from.
And Susan, I think we want to get back to the variance, the setback, the structure.
Yeah. So from a setback standpoint, the vineyard itself will help buffer. I mean, I think Amy said 5 foot. We're actually expecting, as the vines come in, 6-foot vines across several rows of vines that would be absolutely vegetative buffer. The other thing is in the pictures, I think Linda mentioned that it was her farm that was the buffer referenced. That is not accurate. There is buffer on our side of the fence as well. So there's several feet of buffer across the fence lines on that property. So just a few points there.
All right, thank you very much.
I just have one thing.
Okay.
It was just stated that the 4 criteria say unnecessary hardship. That's actually from the 2015 version. In the 2019 version, it was changed to practical difficulty, so we did not reword your statements.
Please restate your name.
Justin Ritter, 13317 Plattsburgh Road. As it's been reiterated a few times already, this hearing is about the variance for the setback. So to address that directly, I don't know why the authors of the code said 400 feet, but they said 400 feet. I can conjecture that the reason is that a building like that with the intended uses, you don't want to plunk that greater than 400 feet or closer than 400 feet from residential properties. The people that it affects the most, directly to the east, directly to the south, and a representative of the people that don't even live there yet, directly to the west, all unanimously say they don't want this here because of the uses of that building. So it's 400 feet for a reason. My pole barn permit for my personal use, I was told don't even bother putting a variance in for it because we don't get variances. So here we're looking for a variance that directly affects people not on their own property. So thank you.
And Chairman, may
The road is that dangerous.
Chairman, may I add, we don't tell people we don't give variances. We allow them to apply for a variance.
Apologies. I didn't mean to throw you.
Now, we do say it's difficult to get a variance. Hold on just a second. We're not going to have comments from the seats. So the
I'm Joyce Ballinger. I live in Oak Ridge, and it is not true that none of us want that there. That was not from us. So I just want to let you know that that was not spoken in truth.
Okay, let's close the comments, and we will move to a vote. I would like just one point of clarification from Mr. Jones. If this is, because we have 2 pages of conditions that some would like to attach. I would suggest that we simply take a vote if it is declined. If it's not approved, the variance is not approved, that doesn't prevent them from coming back later, having considered possible conditions that the neighbors would be more amenable to. Is that correct?
let me make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. Are you asking if the variance is, if you take a vote, the variance is denied tonight, that doesn't keep the applicant from resubmitting for a variance for the same thing and proposing conditions?
Yes.
I believe, I'd have to check the code, I believe there may be a 6-month waiting period,
Okay.
but it does not, it would not keep them from coming back forever.
But they could then perhaps negotiate with neighbors for conditions that might make it more amenable, then they could bring it back.
They could, but it should be, in my opinion, conditions that make the impacts of the building location less on the neighbors.
Right.
It shouldn't be conditions that have nothing to do with that setback.
That's fine. I just know that you said we could add conditions, but I really don't think tonight is the night to go through 2 pages of conditions to see what is acceptable and what's not.
And there's a long list, and some of them, in my opinion, apply to the variance, and some of them proposed do not.
Okay, great. Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we have a vote, but I want to explain, the way this is worded.
We've got to have a motion before you have discussion on the motion. So you either move to approve or you move to deny the application.
We want a motion to
I want to know
approve.
how the way this is worded, this variance, if we vote for it, that says that we're for the 400-foot setback and not 200, whatever.
It's asking for a variance for a 200-foot setback.
So if it's voted to approve, the building would be required to be 200 feet from all property lines.
So we're looking for a motion to approve a variance for a 200-foot setback.
Or a motion to
I
deny.
make a motion that we have a vote for a 200-foot setback.
Do I have a
So to
second?
clarify, is that a motion to approve the application?
Yes.
All right.
So motion is to approve. First motion is to approve.
I'll second it. So, can we get a vote, please?
Buddy Rash.
Approve.
Randall Morris.
Deny.
Mark Beggs.
Abstain.
Christy Soligo Fleshman.
Abstain?
And Larry Witten. The motion does not carry.
Thank you very much. Leave for a couple of minutes for people to leave. Okay, is everybody here for the second one?
There's a meeting still being conducted. You all need to, if you're going to converse, you need to take it out in the hall.
I didn't say Christy was standing. I don't know if I figured that out. Can you send me a copy of that so I can include it with the record? Watch it.
Okay, we'll move on to the second item, second case tonight. And that is case number 22-1.
Give it back to me.
What's that?
Oh, you can take it back. Thank you, Jesus. Wasn't retired.
Randall was just,
He had it on a run, didn't he?
he was. He was just galloping forward.
I just couldn't get rid of the power.
So we're ready to move on to the case number 22-101BZA, which is a request for a variance from section 151-8.3 of the 2011 Clay County Land Development Code pertaining to the required infrastructure improvements for the RU zoning district, specifically a request to allow septic systems for an RU 80 zone subdivision. Such a request would be in non-compliance of the county code requirements. The applicant is Steve Warger, representing John Finch. And is Mr. Warger here? Okay, very good. Staff report?
Yes, Chairman, would like to add the staff report as part of the official record. And I do want to announce that Steve owes everybody for that hour and a half of discussion they had to sit through. So this is, and I've got so much stuff pulled up, just bear with me. I want to get to the right one here. So this is a variance request to section 151-8.3, basically to allow septic systems in RU 80 zoning. I'm going to show the land development code. If I can get to the right page. So just bear with me while I get to the right section here. So there is an infrastructure chart as part of Chapter 8 of the Land Development Code that shows what infrastructure is required, and it's based on zoning. And there it is, if I could get there. So it is this chart right here, 151-8.3. We go down to RU zoning. Under wastewater systems, it says central system or package plant. You see the R5 zoning, which is a 5 to 10 acre lot, it allows septic, or in the R1 and ag zoning, which are 10 and 20 acre lots, it allows the septic, but it does not for an RU zone lot. RU zone lots are lot sizes that are less than 5 acres. It's basically from, I don't know the smallest RU zoning, but it gets down to less than an acre, all the way up to just less than 5 acres. So that is the reason for the variance request, is they don't meet that section of code. I'm going to go back to the staff report. This is the subject property right here. It's surrounded by several interior street subdivisions that are on septic systems. We gave you some density numbers. Now, all of these other subdivisions were approved under previous regulations. You can see from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then Eagle View is the property that we're talking about today. The rezoning has been approved and the preliminary plat has been approved for Eagle View. Those lots range in size from 3.5 to 7.64 acres. You can see the average acreage for Eagle View is in line with those other subdivisions that are on septic systems that were developed under previous regulations. We did some research on the regulations. Actually, I found it interesting. The 2003 code, which is the version of code before our current code, only allowed septics on 10 acres and larger. Whereas now it's 5 acres and larger. Then if you go back to the 2000 code, that's where all these 3 acre lots were allowed to be on septic. Anything from 3 or larger was allowed to be on septic system. That's the 2000 version. And I think even before the 2000 version, septics were allowed on smaller lots. This has the 4 same variance criteria. I'm not going to go through those. We talked about those with the last case. Again, those criteria must be met for a variance to be approved. The variance is to section 151-8.3. The applicant did submit a letter that was included in the staff report. We did get one letter from a property owner that was included in the staff report. And then the applicant also submitted a plat. And we did get, after the staff report was sent out. We did get a submittal from Mr. Steve Walcott, and Angie's going to hand that out if she hasn't already. That will get to you now. Mr. Walcott is here, so he may have some comments as well. Again, same 4 criteria as the previous case, and if the board finds that those 4 criteria are met, then the variance should be approved. And I would be happy to answer any questions the board members have. The applicant is present, and we may have a couple members of the public that want to speak as well.
Thank you. I would like a few minutes just to read through this handout.
And I'm going to get to this location on my map because my map has not been cooperating.
So this letter is an opposition letter, correct?
Not really. No,
Okay.
we've worked out an agreement. I just want you to recognize the agreement we've worked
Okay,
out.
let me read through it here real quick. I just started reading through the first part of it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's proceed. Can we have the applicant or the applicant's representative come forward and state your name and address for the record, please?
You want to swear me in first?
Yeah, we didn't swear.
Oh,
in.
okay, yeah.
Technically,
Would raise your right hand.
Yeah.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Steve Warger, 6127 Northwest Pine Ridge Circle, Parkville, Missouri. I'm here tonight on behalf of John Finch and the Eagle View subdivision. I'm not going to go through a big presentation of all the different points. I think we come down to basically discussing the septic system, how we approach that, and why we're doing that. And Kip did a good job going through that to begin with. But we're proposing 10 lots in the subdivision. They range from 3.5 acres to 7 acres. The 3.5 acre lots are pretty much along 124th Street. We may have one of them in there. As you saw, the neighboring subdivisions have lots that are less, but of course the regulations were different at that time. Coming into this, we knew we were going to be on that because topography, the way it lays out, makes these lots really nice the way they lay out because we got drainage ways behind it. We got those areas, but we knew we had to come out and verify or try and prove why we should be able to get by with less than 5 acres on the septic system. So we went out and had our own geomorphology report done by a third party. Went out, he dug holes in not only one hole in each lot, 2 holes in each lot, so you had one where the proposed system would be in the beginning, and then you had a backup area. So there's 2 locations, and those passed, and we had a report that they could go on less than 3 acres. With that report, we sent that to the Clay County Health Department. which their regulations are actually 3 acres, which doesn't match the code, but that's neither here nor there. They went through, we got a letter of approval from them. There is also another mechanism that this has to be presented when you're doing the septic systems to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. There's 2 avenues there. They do not a geomorphology, but a geohydrology report. They go into that, they determine what the size of lot should be with that. And they came up that you could go down to 0.92 acres within the subdivision and within the soils that are there. And then they have another department within MDNR that concurred with those findings. So we went through and we've gone through and got approvals from not only our own third party, but the Clay County Health Department and the 2 departments in MDNR for 3 acres or less. And so we are here to request that we be allowed to use the 4.65 average, which 3.5 acres is the smallest lot we have, and use septic systems on those lots. Again, those area lots are bigger. There's no other like smaller plants, and we're basically in line. And like Kip said, we've got the planning and zoning approval and commission approval on that. And just to throw it out here, because I know since Mr. Wolcott sat here this whole time, he's probably going to say something. But we are in agreement with his, and I think, I'm pretty sure I sent it to Kip, but I may not have a drawing that showed where we added that berm, and we're called it off either a berm or a swale along that west property line. And the west property line with the trees is in a conservation easement, and we have no intention of touching that, and we're not really allowed to touch that. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you have. And then I've got other members of our team that may want to add something to that,
So one of the criteria that, before we can grant a variance, that we have to get past is the request for the variance can't be created by the owner's intentional act. Whenever your design professional designed this not in compliance with code development, I don't know how you get over that not being an owner's intentional act. If the land surveyor, I'm not sure how this even got to us this far, because it's non-compliant. I don't know, planning, zoning, and this land surveyor certainly should have known the code. And why he developed a plan with less than 5 acres when you weren't going to put in a package plant is kind of beyond me. So help me understand how this variance that you're requiring is not caused by your intentional design. I mean, obviously you put the lines on the paper. So.
right. And I laid that out, the surveyor just did that, so
So
it's all on me. I'm the civil engineer.
You're PE?
I'm civil
Okay.
engineer, PE,
So then
yes.
you've done work in Clay County?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So you're familiar with Land Development Code, Comprehensive Plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm also a PE, so I'm also a civil. So tell me, why did you design something that wasn't compliant?
Well, like I told you, we laid it out, trying to use the topography the best we could, and in doing so, we have ravines and drainage ways that made us go below, and that's why we went through the exercise to go to the Clay County Health Department and MDNR and all that to.
But you know that's irrelevant. I mean, you can make it work.
Yeah,
As
right.
we know as engineers, you could take a 1 acre lot, and you could put a whole bunch of equipment here and make the water run out clean. But that's not what the code says.
Okay.
And I'm looking at topography here, and it looks like it all runs kind of to the north from, what is the street, 124th Street. Looks like that water runs to the north, catches a ditch, and then it runs kind of northeast. And the properties that are kind of north of that drainage kind of go northeast and then come back around that same drainage. So, I mean, I don't see this lots 2 through 5 that are 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.8, why those weren't made 5 if you weren't going to put in a package plan. And I understand you're going to lose lots. I get that. But I still don't see the logic, or I don't see anything technically here that would say, well, we need to make these less than 5 acres. I mean, help me.
You could make 7 lots without making much adjustments by joining lot 2 and 3, by joining lot 4 and 5, and then by redrawing lot 10. and you could have 7 lots that are all above 5 acres without changing anything apart from a few lines.
Correct, we could do that, yes. But we're requesting this based on, in your topography deal, like we have the peak up there. That's why we set that, so we're not sitting down below with some of that drainage. There's drainage that goes between a couple of lots down on 124th Street with taking it through there, and we were trying to hit property lines on those lines. And that's the reason for the layout, the way it was done. Yes, there's 1,000 different ways to lay it out. And we came back and we were requesting that, knowing that we had to go try and satisfy the
I'm sorry, I just don't understand the topography. If all you're doing is joining 2 properties together, you haven't changed any of the external. So the bottom 4 could be turned into 2, and the topography won't make a hill of beans difference to that.
Hey, Director Jones,
That's-
if they did that, would they run into width to depth ratio problems?
If we're talking about which
If
combining,
you combine lots 4 and 5 and lots 2 and 3, you'd have a 660-foot front width with 456-foot depth.
yeah, no, if they're combining those lots, those would meet our requirements.
They would meet?
They would meet.
And the other factor here too is that we are at the UR 81 because of septic, and then also because we're closer to the city, and that's another reason we use that sort of as my basis too. That
For the RU 80 zoning?
Yeah.
But you also knew that you need to put a package plan in for that. That's goes with it.
Understand. But I mean, we use that. You want to know partially why we were doing this. It was because we were closer to the smaller lots. There were smaller lots around us. Yes, does it totally comply? No. But we're asking for the variance, and I understand what the variance comes from, but we're larger than most of the other lots around there.
Yeah, and I see, those other lots were back in, like Kip said, in 2000.
Right.
And I'd like to think that we revised our code because we've found problems with it previously, so I'd hate to take a step back.
Okay.
And because the other thing is we allow this, all of a sudden, now we got a precedent. And now if we're gonna set a precedent, we might as well put this book away. Because we're gonna have everybody come and say, well, you did it for them, why aren't you gonna do it for us? We've had several subdivisions, I know in the last 2 or 3 months, that had exactly the same issue. They were gonna be required to put a central plan in, couldn't do it, so they had to redo the whole subdivision and put larger than 5 acres. So I see making an exception for this is gonna be a problem for us. And besides that, it's an intentional act. I mean, you're asking for variance because of what you've intentionally done here.
Okay.
I don't see, unless you can explain to me how we get past that.
That is just the topography is what I can tell you. So
Okay.
that's where we're at, and, yeah. I mean, I guess if it's UR 80, then I could go down to 2-acre lots with a package plan.
Yeah, I mean, that was my, if you take that logic all the way, then why don't you just make it into 20 lots and just say, hey, we just want variance, but
Right.
we can go down to 9/10 of an acre,
Right.
of course in DNR, so,
Yeah.
yeah. That's the only thing I had. Any other questions from?
Charles?
Charles Small, 249 West Kansas Street, Liberty, Missouri, and I didn't take the oath, but I promise to tell the truth.
Well,
So
hold up
help me
your hand.
God.
I'll swear you in, Charles.
Okay, go ahead.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and maybe Kip's going to have to join in here, but just so you understand, we didn't start down this path with the intent to be out of compliance with anything. We felt like we were in compliance the way we read the code because we were within a mile of Kansas City. And when you read the code, and with Kip's assistance to help, if you're within a mile of Kansas City and Kansas City does not care, then you can go less than that. So we're within a mile of Kansas City. It's, 150, 200 feet within the deal, but you're within that mile. So we made the application based upon that. Until we got to the first meeting, then all of a sudden, the rule kind of changed on us.
Which was planning and zoning?
Planning and zoning meeting.
Okay.
So we drew this with the intent that we were within that mile, we were making application based upon those size lots. you're right. Based upon that, we could have done 20 lots. We can do septic under 9/10 of an acre, or 9/10 of an acre of a lot per the state,
According to DNR.
according to DNR. So we all understand that. So here you had this problem that's like, okay, we're already past this point. We based it on that Kansas City thing. Kansas City wouldn't really give us a letter saying, yeah, they're 100% in favor of this. They gave us a letter that said, we don't care, which you can understand that. So here we are down the path with a minimal amount of lots. We originally had another lot along 124th. We cut it out in the very beginning just to get, because it was a consistent lot size between everything that's to the west. We're 2 times the size, sometimes 3 times the size of that along 124th, and you're at 3.5 acres. So that's how we got here. We didn't come up with this, that we drew it with that intent. We drew it with the intent that we thought we were following the codes, the 1,000 of codes that you're trying to figure out. So it was not a situation when he drew it up that way that wasn't anything other than what we were talking staff about. And then we get to planning and zoning, and oh, well, maybe there's just something else, and interpretation got changed. And so now we're hung out to dry all the way through the process. It didn't come up with any concern whatsoever in either of the zoning meetings, planning and zoning or the commission meeting, just to be clear.
I read the zoning meetings minutes. There wasn't a lot of concern except from Mr. Higgins, who asked, why aren't these 5-acre lots?
Right.
And basically the response was economics. So, yeah. Anybody else in favor that would like to speak? Okay.
And Chairman, if you don't mind me adding something, if you don't have anybody else.
Yes, please.
So I mostly agree with what Mr. Small said, but I want to make it clear, we did advise to do 5 acres from the start. I think we were clear in our pre-application meetings that staff's advice was to do 5+ acres. However, Mr. Small is correct. Initially, when we did the pre-application meeting, I thought that the boards would have some discretion to approve the septic systems going on less than 5 acres. After, the application was submitted and staff did a more in-depth review of that submittal, then my interpretation changed where the variance should be required. So that's kind of my take on the background. So we always try to advise people to meet the code. And during the pre-application meetings, the first meetings we had, we would have stated that, okay, you've got to prove why you should be approved for something like that, but we thought they did not have to come to BZA. Then we did the detailed search and realized they did need to come to BZA.
Yeah, I think your interpretation's right. Just from that table 151.83, it's pretty clear from there. Please.
Stephen Wolcott, 204 East Kansas, Suite A, Liberty, Missouri, attorney for the Martins, who live directly west of actually Lot 10. It's both 9 and 10, the way they come together in the cul-de-sac, but they're directly adjacent to 10. Their only concern was there's already getting runoff towards the north side of their property. It's the part that, the reason I submitted the picture so you can see from their property how it is really uphill. And the only concern we had, and the reason we went out to the site, we ended up with an agreement that if you would approve it, it would be the special condition. There would be either a berm or ravine of some kind that they would erect there outside that line of the tree line, which is part of the preservation area, that they would put something there that would prevent, if there were septic tanks, from it, in addition to the water that's already running off, the septic tanks running off onto my client's property. So we agreed to that, and I'm just here basically, we have no position on the septic tanks. It was just if you approve them, we want that special condition to be added. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak in favor? Okay. Anyone want to speak in opposition? Okay, I'm going to close the floor for public comment. Any discussion amongst the board members? I will entertain a motion.
I'll move we approve.
Vote.
I didn't catch the first and the second.
I move to approve it, and Larry seconded it.
Second.
Thank you. Randall Morris,
Deny.
Larry Witten, Mark Beggs,
Deny.
Christy Saligo Fleshman,
Deny.
and Buddy Rash. Motion denied.
Thank you for coming. Do we have any executive session items that we need to talk about?
I don't believe so. I just do want to update the board that we did not receive any applications, so we will not have a meeting next month.
Excuse me, we're still in session. We should get paid double from that. What did you say?
We did not receive any new applications, so we will not have a meeting next month. We will let everybody know if we receive another application this year, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight.
But if they put in a package part, they can make